Hello, welcome to another 7C video. We'll be covering some more of the basics in this video. This video I'm going to start choosing a starting crew and also the different types of actions you can perform in a turn. So when you start your crew, basically your crew are hidden and you only show your captain and your ship. So let's say my opponent reveals the general and their ship. I reveal Guy McCormick and my ship, and then we choose our starting crew. So here the general is starting next to me, which may or may not affect my starting crew decision. Guy McCormick has 9 starting wealth, so I'm going to start 1, 2, 3 crew that are unaligned, so leaving me 3 more starting wealth. I will hire Maggie, reveal her, and Archaeologist. Basically reveal these all at once. My opponent, meanwhile, hypothetically here, has chosen Pepin for 6, Amboys for 3, and Cutthroats for 1, fulfilling his starting wealth of 10. So here we are, our starting wealth, our crew. The next phase of what you do in the game is decide who goes first. So you look at the total amount of sailing. Here I have 3 and 4 and 2 for a total of 9. My opponent has only 2 sailing, so I would get to go first. And then what you do from here is you each take a sequence of actions. So I would take an action, my opponent would take an action. And then you keep doing this until you both pass, and then the turn ends. So here are the various types of actions that I could do. One action that I could do is I could hire a crew. So the way you hire a crew, or the way you perform any action really, is put it on the table and announce, I'm attempting to do this action. I'm attempting to hire this crew, Jacob Faust, who's both in my faction and loyal. So I can hire him since he's loyal to my own captain. And then I would do is put him out and pay for him. So Faust would cost 5 influence, because on the top left, that's his cost. So I attack the captain for 4, he has 4 influence, and attack a marketeer for 1. And there we go. I was able to play Jacob Faust. Another action that you could do is you could experience a crew. So let's say I had another copy of Jacob Faust in my hand, and I wanted to play him over. I could basically, as an action, play him on top of that Jacob Faust, and then the inexperienced version that was in play goes into your discard pile. A couple rules for discarding for experiencing a crew. Has to be the same crew, the same guy. You place it over, and the old one goes into your discard. Experiencing a crew is different than hiring a crew. So if you have any key cards that key off of hiring a crew, experiencing does not count. Another thing, if a crew is loyal and you experience the crew, let's say that the experienced crew is loyal to a different faction, you can't legally experience it. It has to be in faction if it's loyal. So you have to obey all those rules as well. And lastly, the experience, it still obeys uniqueness rules. So let's say you had a character out that was unique and you experienced him, you can only have one of each in play at a time. So that covers the second type of action, experiencing a crew. Third, play or perform an action. Some actions say specifically on them that they are an action. So if you have an action, this one says react, this one also says react, but if you have an action that says action on it, I'll look through my deck right now, and I can probably find one. Here's an example, Sailing on the Jolly Roger. This action says here, act. Search your deck and discard pile for any one adventure card, show it to your opponent, then place it in your hand. So I could play this as an action, because it has act on it. The fourth thing you can do is place an adventure in play. So here, Ruined Ship's Wheel, unique, 1 sea away. It's tacked for 5 adventuring, but it's cheaper if it's in the trade sea. So let's say, for example, I was in the Frothing Sea, and I placed this 1 sea over. Now it would be 2 to complete it. If I did the other way, it would cost more. Another action that you can do, the 5th one listed in the rulebook, is playing a shanty. So here, right here in my hand, this is a shanty. Shanties play on the table. You can only have 1 shanty in play at a time. If there's another one already in play, when you successfully play this and it resolves, it would sink any existing shanty and then it would go to the sunk pile. So you play the shanty. If a shanty has a cancel box, the opponent would have an opportunity to cancel it. This one does not, so it's played, and that counts as another action. Another action that I could do is completing an adventure. So let's say I played this, and this is 1 sea over. I could move if I moved to this sea, or if I was already in this sea, then I could complete it by paying the cost. So here it says attack 5 adventuring, or 2 if completed it in the trade C. So I could attack the archaeologists here who have 2 adventuring, completing the ruined ship's wheel, and it says here ship attachment. So then I would attach it to my ship. You can place it here. Sometimes I just place all my ship attachments over to the side. It's really up to you. Then you get a benefit. In addition to completing an adventure, the 7th type of action that you can perform is playing an attachment. So here is an attachment. It says here, Explorer Captain Attachment. You may only play this card into play if you have 1 or more completed artifact adventures in play. So if we look at the adventure over here, it has the artifact keyword on the 2nd line. So I could play this in play. So let's say I played that and I attach that to my captain. Now I have the benefit on following turns. We talked about how if I was in the 1C and the adventure was in the other, how I would need to move over. Moving is another type of action that you are allowed to perform. In order to move, you need to produce sailing equal to your ship's move cost. So here in the top right-hand corner is my ship's move cost of 4. So I can move my ship by paying 4 sailing as an action. So here I have Magpie Muskov, who has 4 sailing. So as an action, announce I'm going to move my ship, and I'm going to do it by attacking Magpie to produce 4 sailing, and that would move the ship over as an action, therefore allowing me on a subsequent turn to be able to complete the adventure as another action. So it would take 2 actions to move over and then complete the ship. Another action is if I'm in the same sea as my opponent, I can also perform a cannon attack. The way you perform cannon attacks is you attack a crew and produce cannon skill equal to their cannon. So Jacob Faust here has 1 cannon, so I can attack him and do a cannon attack for 1. And then the opponent here would need to attack or sink crew with swashbuckling equal to or greater than 1. Another action is performing a boarding. Now, performing a boarding is fairly complicated, so I'll just say this. It'll be a separate video for basically how boardings work, but the entire act of a boarding is 1 singular action. So if I performed a boarding as my action, when that boarding ended, then that would be the end of my action, and then my opponent would get an action after that. Another action, it's not quite obvious, but it's definitely an option. If your ship is full, let's say, for example, my ship has 10, a crew max of 10. Let's say I had enough crew on here and I was full, then what I could do as an action is discard a crew. So I could target Marketeer and say, as my action, I'm discarding Marketeer. And that's a valid action as well. Another action that's not used too often but might come into play is you can discard an uncompleted adventure as an action. So if I have not completed the Ruined Ship's Wheel, as a separate action, I could say I'm going to discard that as an action. Lastly, passing is also in and of itself an action. So you can pass as an action, and if both players pass in succession, I pass, every other opponent passes, then the turn ends. If basically I take an action, in general the opponent's going to take an action, then I take an action, then the opponent, until the opponent may pass, I might take an action, then they have the option. Since I didn't pass, the turn's still going, they could take an action again. So just note, actions are done sequentially until both players pass at once. That right there is all of the actions. Just to cover it real quick, there are 13 different types of actions. You can hire a crew, you can experience a crew that's in play with an experience version from your hand. You can play an action card that says act on it as an action. You can put an adventure into play as an action. You can complete an adventure if you're in the same sea as it as an action. You can put a shanty into play as an action. You can play an attachment. You can move your ship by paying your ship's move cost. You can perform a cannon attack against an opponent who is in the same sea. You can perform a boarding as a singular action. The 11th one is you can discard a crew as an action. The 12th is discard an adventure. And finally, you can pass as an action. And that covers all the things you can do as actions in 7th C.